Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. And now, from the Seehafer News Studio, your moderator, Brian Norton.
And welcome to our Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc, the second of three debates that we are having here during this 2020 election cycle. Yesterday, we heard from the candidates for the 2nd Assembly District, Republican incumbent Shay Sortwell and his Democratic challenger, Mark Kiley. And today on the program, we welcome the two candidates that are vying for your vote to represent you in Washington, D.C. The two candidates for the 6th Congressional District are joining us in our WOMT studios on today's Seehafer News Radio Debates. Joining us in the studio, the incumbent. This is his third two-year term representing constituents in the 6th Congressional District, including here in Manitowoc County, Republican incumbent Glenn Grothman, and he's being challenged by Democrat Jessica King. Mr. Grothman and Ms. King, thank you for being on the program, and thank you for partaking in today's Seehafer News Radio Debates. Glad to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to be on the show.
Well, we just want to, before we get to the opening statements, we do want to let all you listeners know that unfortunately we are not going to be able to take phone calls. We just don't have the time really to do that. So if you want to take part in the debate, we do have our WOMT Shoreline text line open, 920-682-4674, 920-682-4674, and if you do text, a reminder, you must use 920. Also, we do want to let you know that opening statements are going to be made here shortly by the candidates, and a flip of the coin out in the lobby determined that Jessica King did win the coin toss, but she has decided to go last in her opening statement. Thus, she will give her closing statement last. So before we get to the questions and open up the WOMT Shoreline text line for your questions, let's begin today's Seehafer News Radio Debate by hearing from the Republican incumbent of the 6th Congressional District, Glenn Grothman. And Mr. Grothman, you have 90 seconds to give your opening statement.
Okay, I'd like to thank Seehafer Broadcasting for putting on this debate. I know you do a great job of informing all the residents of Manitowoc County what's going on. I am Glenn Grothman, your congressman, and I'm honored to serve you, and I'm asking for the honor of serving you for another 2 years. I feel I've earned a reputation for fiscal conservatism, but of also being independent. I'm not afraid to stand up to special interests. I can stand up to Republican leadership if necessary, and not afraid to work with Democrats. I also don't think there's another member of Congress who spends more time back in the district meeting with as many different people as I can, be it Lions Clubs, American Legions, church festivals, or what have you. Like I said, I come home every weekend. Sometimes when you run for this job, you wind up with some surprises. We've had two big surprises since my last election, one COVID, another the riots that have rocked the country. We've passed 4 bipartisan bills, and we have done a lot towards fighting the COVID, but I look forward to doing more along those lines. I have been on the radio, including this radio station, alerting people to the severity of the crisis. I myself have had 2 short-tail relatives who passed away to the disease, so I know how serious we have to take it. I also have been looking out for law enforcement in Washington. They have been under attack. Other areas I intend to address are welfare reform, sheltered workshops, biosimilars, and skills-based education.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. And Jessica King, please, you have 90 seconds to give your opening statement.
Well, thank you. Really a pleasure to be on this station today to inform and educate your listeners. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jessica King. I'm a former Wisconsin State Senator and former Oshkosh Common Council member, former Deputy Mayor in the city of Oshkosh. My family has been part of Wisconsin's 6th Congressional District for going on 6 generations now. Originally, we're from Fond du Lac County area, the town of Empire. My family was dairy farmers for several generations and machinists. For the last 7 years, I've been the vice president of a healthcare company, a nationwide healthcare company that represents hospitals and patients against health insurance companies to recover wrongfully denied payment of medical bills. And I know that there's many people in the 6th Congressional District that really support healthcare reform. And I'm one of those people that's here to talk about that as an issue. And it's become even more clear that we need affordable, accessible, and quality health care. The COVID crisis and the current recession have really brought home the fragility of the federal response regarding health care, the need for health care, and how unaffordable and inaccessible it truly is right now. So I think we have an opportunity in this recession to really take a close look at health care. The United States is the 3rd largest country in the world by terms of population, and yet we pay the highest prices in the world. So we really want to look for solutions that make health care more affordable. The House of Representatives had a bill, H.R. 3, that would have made prescriptions more affordable for working people, and Representative Grothman voted against it. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to get in the race.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jessica King, for your opening statement. And we do have a question that has just come in. I was going to ask one first, but I guess this just kind of chimes in with both of you and what you talked about in your opening statement in regards to COVID-19. Question to begin from our WOMT Shoreline text line. Do either of you have a specific plan to deal with this pandemic? And why don't we begin this time around with Jessica King, please?
Thank you. Yes, I think the federal government needs to use the Defense Production Act to make rapid-acting tests available that do not require clinical lab processing or a diagnosis based on symptoms. The number one problem we need to solve today is how we're going to find asymptomatic carriers of this disease and give them that knowledge so that way they can do the patriotic thing and isolate to save lives. We've already lost over 224,000 lives to this disease, and that's a lot of families that are missing their loved ones and relatives, and I think we really need to look for better ways to tackle this. I also believe that we need an additional stimulus package. It's a shame that so many local businesses and communities have been damaged while there's a delay in this package. And the truth is, I think we need to find compromises, and that's what everybody should be working toward. Municipal and county level governments need stimulus and need relief. I also believe that homeowners and renters also need some relief right now. And we also need to continue to support our essential workforce, especially in our child care. I know my son is attending virtual school, and I'm assuming there's a lot of listeners that are also working that have children in virtual school, and we really need to support those folks, by making sure more essential workers are available, because we don't want to have a lost generation that's missing out on education or support because of what's happening with the pandemic, and we don't see a solution or a cure soon.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Grothman. Go ahead, please.
Well, I point out this is an example where we have had a lot of bipartisan agreement already. 4 bills have passed Congress, overwhelmingly Republican and Democrat support. I have done what I can to encourage people to behave in a more healthy lifestyle. I've done what I can to advocate for increased vitamin D. I think we have got to focus on what we're going to do if a vaccine is not available in the near future, that we have dedicated billions of dollars for searching for that vaccine. The most recent bill that has been out there I have opposed because I think, sadly, and I'm not a partisan person at all, but what they call the HEROES Act requires $1,200 payments to illegal immigrants. It requires a tax cut for kind of the wealthiest of people and gets involved in things like getting rid of photo ID. I think what we have to focus on is helping the businesses and individuals who are in the worst situation. I myself contributed a paycheck to local food pantries. I do believe that as far as businesses, the first packages sometimes gave money to businesses which were, quite frankly, not suffering due to the COVID. And I think in the future we have to narrow those. The same thing is true of the $1,200 payments in the future. Like I said, I take this seriously, and I do use my position to educate people how serious this is. I do talk to the local hospitals on the situation, and having lost 2 relatives here, I do encourage people, particularly people with pre-existing conditions, to look out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. Both of you, if you don't mind, I have a follow-up question to this, and again, you'll have your full 90 seconds. Right now, there are negotiations going on in Washington, D.C. between House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. They're trying to come to some sort of common ground before Election Day. They had a hard deadline of yesterday, which came and went. Apparently on the Republican side, they're saying there's too much money in there to bail out governments and states that are failing. That is kind of holding this up. And there are even some in the Republican Party who say that perhaps a $2 trillion package that is being bandied around in Washington, D.C. is too much. There seems to be some give and take here. A lot of people, as both of you alluded to, do need help, but I guess the big question is, how do we get there? My question to both of you is, can we come to some sort of an agreement? Can bipartisanship become more real to help real people that are in need out there in this country and in this district? And Mr. Grothman, can you begin this time, please?
Sure. Like I mentioned, we've passed 4 bills already, almost unanimously, with Republicans and Democrats voting together. So there's no reason why we can't get something bipartisan done. I believe on the 5th package that there are provisions in the HEROES Act, and again, I'm considered myself an overly partisan person, but when you expect us to act for new $1,200 checks for illegal immigrants, and actually not only that, give $1,200 checks to illegals for the last payments that they didn't get, when you include things in there like getting rid of photo IDs in elections, or I think that's too far. Plus, we've already spent $3 trillion. I know the Senate Republicans want to spend another $500 billion. I could vote for a package like that, but when you hold out for over $2 trillion, I think maybe it would be easier to get something like that through 10 days from now or 12 days from now, after the election. We didn't have this partisan bickering. And I don't like to wait another 12 days, but $2 trillion is a lot of money, particularly because in the past, a lot of the payments went to people who really didn't need it.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. Jessica King, go ahead and respond, please.
Well, thank you. I'm actually a supporter of the bipartisan bill called the SMART Act. And the SMART Act really focuses on municipal and state level economic relief. We know that there are revenue shortfalls for state and local governments at this point. A lot of the nonpartisan researchers have said that the recession we're in is actually currently deeper and broader than the 2008 recession. I think we have to learn from those experiences. I myself was a Chapter 7 bankruptcy trustee, and I understand how important loan modifications are for both homeowners and farmers who are just trying to re-leverage their debt to make it till the economy grows and gets better. And I do want to have an optimistic future. I think that's really important. I think one of the great things that the CARES Act did was that it supported our frontline early childhood caregivers with essential worker increase in pay of $5 per hour. And we found that that was essential to keeping our child care workforce and our frontline essential employees on the job and available. And I think it's those kind of provisions that we have to look for bipartisan support. Again, if we don't support our state and local governments, we're going to deepen and widen the recession, and that's something that I can't accept. We can look back at the other recessions, and I was in local government at that time. I understand what the proposals are that truly support local municipal recovery. I think we have to look at this recovery as an opportunity to build a sustainable future, whether that's in support of public transit or other rental assistance programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica King. And again, if you are just tuning in, this is our second of a series of 3 Seehafer News Radio Debates, Election Cycle 2020, and presented by Novak Service Center Manitowoc. Today we have the 2 candidates vying for your vote in the 6th Congressional District. Representative and incumbent Republican Glenn Grothman, challenged by Democrat Jessica King. Let's go to the WOMT Shoreline text line again. And this question, I guess it's a 2-parter, but it's relatively easy. What would you do to protect Social Security, 1, and employer contributions to Social Security, number 2? Jessica King, you can go first, please.
Well, I'll tell you, we need to shore up the funding for Social Security right now, with the discontinuing of collection of the payroll taxes has really jeopardized Social Security. I'm not a supporter of that mechanism, using that kind of mechanism for economic relief. I would ask the president to discontinue that, because Social Security is fundamental. I'm actually supportive of some of the proposals I've heard at the federal level to actually increase Social Security benefits, because we have our elders of our communities who have worked for decades and have put that, paid into the Social Security system for their whole working lives. And what we're finding now is that many of these elderly retirees do not have enough to make ends meet. And one of the things we can do to help keep them secure is by actually looking at the benefits and potentially increasing them. And to do that, we have to, secure funding resources. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to really respect our elders and make sure that they can live in dignity within our communities. And we have to remember that those Social Security dollars are actually spent right here with our local businesses, and our seniors are part of our economy, and they spend that money here locally, and we want to support our local businesses. And part of that is by making sure Social Security stays strong for generations to come.
Thank you, Jessica King. And Congressman Grothman, go ahead, please.
Right, I am an advocate for Social Security and for Medicare. Unlike some people, I think we should continue to give Medicare always at age 65, and we cannot cut Social Security. I think the number one way to keep Social Security solvent is have a strong economy. I mean, right, when everybody's working, when people are getting raises, the amount of money we get in Social Security taxes keeps on going up. And so therefore, I look at the way to keep Social Security solvent, having a strong workforce, getting more people involved in what I call skills-based education. If we get more people, young people in particularly, making a living wage, be it in manufacturing, be it construction, be it in healthcare, all of which have shortage of skilled labor, those people are paying more Social Security tax, and we'll be able to push off the day in which we have a crisis. The time we're going to have a crisis in Social Security is when we have a crisis of the overall debt in federal government. Like I said, I've had a history of saying no to things. I'm not for spending another $2 trillion right now. I think we can get out of that for $500 billion. One way to hold down future debt, and above all, keeping the economy strong, in part with the tax cuts, but even more, we want to keep the economy strong with skills-based education, using the tech schools to get people in good manufacturing jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. And again, for those of you just tuning in, we welcome you to today's Seehafer News Radio Debate, our second of 3 this election cycle, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. I'm Brian Norton, today's moderator, and today you are hearing directly on the issues from Republican incumbent 6th District Congressman Glenn Grothman, being challenged this election cycle by Jessica King, vying for your vote to represent you in Washington, D.C. Again, these are the Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc.
This is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And we welcome you back to today's Seehafer News Radio Debate. As today, the candidates from the 6th Congressional District vying for your vote to represent you in Washington, D.C. are here at our Seehafer News broadcast studios to tell you how they feel on the issues. Republican incumbent Glenn Grothman and challenger Jessica King. And again, if you have anything that you would like to hear from these candidates, if you have a question, our WONT Shoreline text line is open, 920-682-4674, 920-682-4674. Again, we will not be taking phone calls during today's debate. Let's see. We have another question in from our WMT Shoreline text line simply asking this: what are your views on abortion? Jessica King, you can go first, please.
Well, thank you. This is obviously a very sensitive topic. One of the things I think when we talk about bipartisan support and working together, one of the opportunities we have is to really increase education, health education. And the example I look at is in Colorado. The Colorado Initiative was funded through philanthropists to do a study to see if they could reduce the number of abortions in teens from 18 to the ages of 14 to 18, and then the ages of 19 to 24. And they spent quite a bit of money on health education and knowledge and access to contraception. And they found that they were able to reduce the number of abortions by 50% in Colorado in the age group of 14 to 18, and that they were also able to reduce the number of abortions between the ages of 19 and 24-year-olds. And not only did that reduce the number of abortions, but it also reduced the government spending on programs. The state of Colorado saved over $60 million by the use of these public health programs to encourage safe sexual practices and educating people, about the risks of unplanned pregnancies. And I guess as your congressional representative, I would be really looking to utilize programs like that, because I truly believe that the number of unplanned pregnancies that we can reduce by working together is truly the goal. And I wouldn't want to see more women and more families suffering, and so it's really important that we look for that common goal.
Thank you, Representative Grothman.
I have a long-time history of being pro-life. I'm endorsed by both Wisconsin Right to Life and Pro-Life Wisconsin. When I was in the state legislature, I was the author of a 24-hour waiting period bill, which I think at the time became kind of the model for the country. It was the best bill of its kind at that time. I think the United States today is one of only 5 or 6 countries around the world in which late-term abortion is legal, which is a stain on our country, which has a great Christian heritage. And I have concerns about Planned Parenthood. Not only is it the largest abortion provider in the country, but I think its educational programs are sometimes inappropriate for very young people, and I think may kind of accept promiscuity as too much of the norm. So in any event, I've been a pro-life congressman and state legislature for a long time, and I expect to continue down that path in the future.
Thank you, Representative Grothman. And we have a lot of questions starting to come in here. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. From the WMT Shoreline text line, we'll begin with Representative Grothman first here. Do you support campaign finance reform to prevent special interest influence on our representatives? Mr. Grothman?
Well, we have a First Amendment. I don't know exactly what the listener had in mind there. I do think it's important to stay free of the influence of special interests. I myself don't take money from drug companies. I don't take money from cigarette companies. I don't take money from Goldman Sachs. I mean, I do try to stay away. I don't take money from payday lenders. And I think the best way to make sure things are on the up and up is just publicizing who is giving candidates money. And like I said, I think the Supreme Court in the past has said that you cannot forbid people from making contributions or from taking out ads. And quite frankly, one of the bigger problems we have right now is some of the government restrictions force too much money into outside interest, independent groups. I don't think we've had any of that in this campaign. I hope we won't have it yet in the future, but that is a major problem. And I wish the press would do a better job of sometimes connecting the dots on government spending and who's giving the big campaign contributions, because it is a story that hasn't been talked about enough, in my opinion. Particularly in Washington, far more than in Madison, a lot of the spending is going on, I think, because of too many politicians have one eye on the amount of money that they're taking in.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. Jessica King, go ahead, please.
Yes, I too am a supporter of campaign finance reform. I truly believe that corporations are putting in quite a bit of money under the guise of issue advocacy to actually support candidates that will follow what they consider to be the golden rule, which is he who has the money makes the rules. And I think we find that too many of us today, average everyday working people, don't have the ability to influence legislation on a federal level because it's so dominated by lobbyists and billionaires. You know, when you think about the fact that 26 Fortune 500 companies paid zero federal income tax between 2008 and 2012, one of the reasons I think that happens is because they're allowed to spend unlimited sums of money to influence and intimidate incumbents and elected officials to pass legislation that keeps these big loopholes open. Right now, each year, $1.22 trillion in loopholes and tax giveaways happens. And these corporations don't pay their fair share in taxes, largely because they have so much influence, and it's because of this campaign spending. So yes, I think we need reform. I think we need transparency, and ultimately, I would support a constitutional amendment to end corporate personhood, because I truly believe that these large Fortune 500 corporations have too much influence in our political system, and I truly believe it should be one living person, one vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica King. I guess I got to follow up to this, relatively simple, and again, each of you will have 90 seconds to expound. Beginning with Jessica King, are you in favor of term limits?
Thank you for the question. I think it depends on the number of terms. We have somebody here like Representative Grothman, who has been a career politician for 27 years. Now, mind you, he's been in the state assembly, he's been in the state senate, and he's been in Congress. But I think it would really help if we had more elected people who were serving in the, who had career experience in the private sector. Because I truly think that, your perspective is based off of your lived experience. And I'm somebody who's owned a business for several years. I've worked for a large corporation. I've worked as a solo practitioner. And I really believe that having that kind of experience is really, really important. And to bring that into the legislature. And you know what? I would support term limits. You have to tell me how many terms, but I think it's a good thing. Because we need to have more real people involved in politics. And when people like Congressman, Grothman can develop war chests, I mean, he's spending, $1.8 million, and how do I compete with that? But he's been able to build those sums up over a term of years in service. He's, and that's hard to compete with. So yeah, I do believe in term limits, sir.
Thank you, Jessica King. Representative Grothman.
Yeah, I think some sort of term limits would be okay. I think the major problem, though, having been there, is are you fresh and are you independent? And I consider myself, very fresh, very independent, very hardworking. Like I said, I think to this day, I don't think there's another congressman who goes around and spends more time meeting different people. I do think in Washington we have a problem, and that a lot of times the committee chairman, where the power rests, are purely done on a seniority basis. And as the result, you get people who've been around there for 24 or 26 years who are running the show. And, well, I think a lot of these people can't help but changing because they've been there a while. Maybe they hang around with people who are more wealthy or spend too much time hanging around lobbyists and lose touch of what the average person is interested in. I wouldn't mind voting on some sort of a term limit bill. I don't think that'd be a bad thing, but I think, like I said, I think the big problem is, do you have people who are no longer fresh in Washington? And insofar as you do, let's illustrate their voting record and who they're getting money from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. And for those of you tuning in, thank you for being a part of today's WOMT Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. And joining us in studio today, the two candidates vying for your vote to represent you in Washington, D.C. in the 6th Congressional District. Incumbent Republican Representative Glenn Grothman and challenger Jessica King. We'll have more questions on the WOMT Shoreline text line. And just a heads up, we have a lot of them that are coming in. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all of them. We'll do the best that we possibly can. 920-682-4674 if you would like to chime in. as you were listening to our Seehafer News Radio Debates presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our Seehafer News Radio Debates here on this 2020 election cycle. I'm moderator Brian Norton. Glad to have you along on the program. If you're just tuning in, right to the top of the hour, we are hearing directly from the candidates that are vying for a 2-year term to represent you in the 6th Congressional District in Washington, D.C. Incumbent Republican Representative Glenn Grothman and challenger Jessica King. A reminder coming up tomorrow from 1 to 2 o'clock. We'll wrap up our Seehafer News Radio Debate series with the 2 candidates of the 25th Assembly District here to talk on the issues. They are Republican incumbent Representative Paul Tittle and challenger Democrat Carrie Trask. That'll be tomorrow, 1 until 2, on the Seehafer News Radio Debates. But back now to our debate for the 6th Congressional District, and we are going to begin with Representative Grothman on this one. And the question is simply this, Mr. Grothman, what's your view on the Second Amendment?
Well, I'm a Second Amendment advocate. Our forefathers did a great job putting together the Constitution. I think when they put that Second Amendment out there, they wanted the right to bear arms with the individual, not solely the government. I think during my lifetime there were various different people taking shots at the Second Amendment. When I was in high school, they were saying we had to get rid of handguns. Now they want to say they want to get rid of long guns. But if you look, we've done a good job with crime, not in the last couple of years, but going back about 30 years, the number of homicides has declined precipitously. It's declined, I think, largely because we've had tough law enforcement. We've put the bad guys away, and as the result, if you compare the number, you should compare the number of homicides in this country in 1980 and 1990 compared to today. We've made so much progress, and made so much progress despite the fact that the population has grown during that time. So I think, doing things like cracking down on felons with firearms is a big move in the right direction. I hope we stop picking on the police, because we've had an uptick in homicides the last 2 years, and I think that is primarily because of politicians taking cheap shots at police. It makes the police more tentative, more passive, and that has resulted in an increase in homicides this year. But historically, we've been going down for 30 years, going down for 30 years in homicides.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. Jessica King. Jessica, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, I think it's possible to support the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. A lot of my family members are gun owners, people who were either service-connected or people who are in the hunters. And I understand the role that plays in part of our Wisconsin heritage. What really has me concerned lately is the inability to effectively complete background checks. I think many people know right now that there's a 3-day waiting period for the FBI to complete a background check. And what research has told us is that we aren't properly funding the FBI and that they cannot complete 11% of their background checks within the 3-day period. And so that's alarming. Each year in the United States, there are 9,000 guns that end up in the hands of people who did not actually pass the background check, and then it's really hard to put the cows back in the barn, so to speak. And so we're letting, without having a good system of background checks, we're letting people who truly should not have these guns have them. And I think that's really a disservice to everyone, and that's actually part of what makes our communities not safe. So I think we really have to look at funding to make sure that our these background checks can be completed timely, and that we really are looking to make sure that more of our gun sales actually go through background checks, because we truly don't want people to have weapons who don't pass a background check. I don't think anybody wants that. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question here on the Shoreline text line. We have a lot of them here. Hopefully we'll get to as many of them as we can. It's kind of a dovetail on what we just talked about. Question is, do you believe America is a racist country and rioting and attacking our police is an appropriate way to protest? Jessica King, you can go first, please.
Well, I'll tell you, there have been some circumstances that have really called into question the appropriate behaviors with law enforcement. Now, I live in the city of Oshkosh, Winnebago County, and it's not too many years ago that we actually had a Republican district attorney found guilty of state and federal charges for criminal bribe taking, and he was our top law enforcement professional. And so I think living through that experience and being part of that process, I understand how complicated it is when someone you give public trust to violates that trust. And District Attorney Joe Paulus has spent federal and state time in jail because he dishonored public trust. So I think what we all need to do in order to work together is to get back to this notion of restoring trust. And I truly believe that starts by properly funding special prosecutors to investigate each and every instance of officer-involved death. We need to have independent fact finders, independent prosecutors presenting that evidence so that way these cases can truly be handled correctly and without undue influence by local special interests. So that's my position on that. I think we have a long way to go, but I think the first thing we need to do is restore that trust in our system, because justice denied to one person is justice denied to all of us, and we cannot allow corruption in our processes. We need to have citizens trusting their law enforcement, because if it doesn't work for one person, it could potentially not work for all of us.
Thank you, Representative Grothman. Go ahead, please.
Well, when I was in the state legislature, I did work on legislation which didn't pass, making it easier to get rid of a poor police officer. That being said, I think the current effort out of Washington to curtail police is way overboard and is unnecessarily critical of police. I think you've seen an increase in the number of murders in this country the last year, in part because of anti-police politicians. They're trying to get rid of what they call qualified immunity so that police officers could be sued every time they handcuff somebody, anytime they wrestle with somebody. Every police chief or sheriff I've talked to, be they Democrat or Republican, are very opposed to that sort of idea. I think the amount of racism in America is very exaggerated. There is racism, but I talk to people from all over the world who come here, people from Philippines, people from Morocco, people from Korea, people from India, Pakistan. Again and again, they're so happy to be here. And I know a lot of politicians right now are, I think, for political purposes, grossly exaggerating the amount of racism in our country. I, in general, stand with our police. I think we get rid of some of the bad ones, but overall, I am pro-police.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. You are listening to our second of three Seehafer News radio debates this election cycle, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. Today we're hearing directly from the candidates vying for your vote to represent you in the 6th Congressional District in Washington, D.C. for the next 2 years. We're joined by Republican incumbent Representative Glenn Grothman and challenger Jessica King of Oshkosh. You're listening to the Seehafer News radio debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning into 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our Seehafer News radio debate. Today, we are hearing directly from the candidates. We're looking for your vote November 3rd to represent you in Washington, D.C. for the next 2 years here in the 6th Congressional District. We are here in the studio today with Republican incumbent Representative Glenn Grothman and his challenger Jessica King, a Democrat from Oshkosh. We'll start with Representative Grothman on this one, and again from our WOMT Shoreline text line. What is your stance on the Green New Deal? Wisconsin nearly lost 700 dairy farms in 2019 And the president of the Wisconsin Dairy Association has said that it would result in a certain death for the dairy industry. And I believe there's a little more on, nope. Says many members of Congress, including those from Wisconsin, have embraced the plan. Do you support the Green New Deal? If so, please explain. Mr. Grothman,
No.
go ahead, please.
No, I don't support the Green New Deal. I think it would result in greatly increased energy prices for the average person. I think, as mentioned in the question, it would be devastating for Wisconsin agriculture, but not only be devastating for Wisconsin agriculture, it would be devastating for Wisconsin manufacturing as well. We have had a cleaner environment during my lifetime, be it air pollution or water pollution, no comparison. And I think every time we put up a new power plant, every time we put a new car on and replace it with an old car, the environment gets cleaner and cleaner. On the other hand, you have to remember that we are competing globally with China, we're competing with India, we're competing with countries that are not going to, I think, follow through on so-called promises that are made for cleaner power plants, cleaner cars, that sort of thing. And I feel that continuing down the current path of cleaner air and cleaner water as we enforce the laws that are on the books now is the path to go. We should not be mucking up Wisconsin manufacturing. The United States, compared to other countries, has done a tremendous job of decreasing decreasing pollution, be it air or water pollution. I remember as a child the Milwaukee River being a complete mess. You look at it now, people are fishing, getting things that you wouldn't believe were there when I was in high school. So I am opposed to the Green New Deal, which I think is a radical step damaging to agriculture and damaging to manufacturing.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. Jessica King, you can go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think that's an interesting perspective because I truly see this recession that we are in, this recession that's likely to be deeper than the 2008 recession. We have to look at an opportunity for how we build a sustainable future and what really the role is for agriculture. One of the things I truly believe is right now our local family farmers are not being compensated for the conservation efforts that they do take. When they decide to plant a cover crop, whether it be rye or what have you, that captures carbon, I think there's an opportunity for them to be compensated for that. I think it's important that our local farmers are compensated for the effort they put in planting cover crops to also manage nitrates, which there are these efforts that they do. And the truth is, I think the bigger national security threat for us right now is actually foreign corporate ownership of our farmland. And so, it's so important that our local people retain ownership of our land and that we support farmers who support good conservation habits. I also think there's a role in restoring wetlands that our local farmers could play, and I think they should be compensated for that too. Again, this is about how we choose to use our tools for economic stimulus. I would like to see less money spent on subsidizing commodities, looking closer at local food and regional food production. And that's one of the reasons why I became an investor in our local co-op, because I want to make more markets for farmers.
Thank you, Jessica King. And one more here before we take our final break. Well, we have so many here, and I want to make sure that we get to as many of them as we can. Here is a question here. We'll start with Jessica King. What is a living wage, in your opinion, in District 6? And do you think that our minimum wage should equate to that level of income? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I do actually believe that we need to increase living wages here. The median income in this district, is really stretching people to make sure they can meet ends meet, especially working parents. And we want to actually encourage people to raise and have families in the 6th Congressional District. And I think one of the reasons why people aren't starting families younger or taking that step to have children is because they don't really think they can afford it. I think minds could disagree about what that living wage truly is, but I know it's really difficult to rent an apartment in the 6th Congressional District if you're making less than $15 an hour. And I think it also depends on whether or not you're married or a single person. And, Glenn being a single person, I was a single person for a long time in my life. And you understand that, if you have to make it on that one income. So it's really important that, we have this conversation. I do think there's an opportunity to raise the federal minimum wage, because I think $7.25 an hour is definitely not a living wage. And again, I think I said this earlier, I think it's really important that we look at our essential frontline workers during the COVID crisis, and I do believe in extending their essential wage increases. That especially for caregivers, it's so important that we pay a living wage to people who take care of our children and people who are working in our daycares and early childhood development. They need to be compensated for the work they do, because it's so important and the future of our children depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Grothman.
Well, even during this economic dip, I spend a lot of time getting around this district, touring manufacturing facilities, talking to owners of construction, dealing with health care, and wherever you look, there are jobs available right now. The problem is we don't have the skills to match those jobs. And our educational system, to too large a degree, is giving people degrees in things that do not lead to those, not just $25,000 or $30,000 a year jobs, but the $50,000 or $70,000 or $90,000 a year jobs. Those jobs are out there. Manufacturers have them, construction has them, transportation has them, but we have to push people who go into our education system into degrees that lead to those jobs. Right now we have far too many people building up student loan debt, which is another thing that puts you in a difficult situation. If everybody would try to get a skill in their education, after 2 or 3 years, we could have people earning those higher amounts at age 22 instead of age 32. We could have people not getting these big $40,000 or $50,000 loans. So that is the answer: more skills-based education and directing people to those high-paying jobs.
Well, why don't we take this follow-up question here, and then we'll get to our final break. We'll start with Representative Grothman. This kind of dovetails into what we're talking about here. The question on the WONT Shoreline text line: the state of Wisconsin, and more specifically the 6th Congressional District, has one of the highest concentrations of manufacturing jobs, such as Mercury Marine, Oshkosh Corporation, and Rockline Industries. How does the USMCA positively impact this industry? We'll start with Representative Grothman.
Yeah, so your listeners, though, the USMCA, that's the trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. What it does do is it opens up markets for the United States, not only in manufacturing, but opens up markets in agriculture as well. I was proud to vote for it. I think in the past, the old NAFTA agreement negotiated by President Clinton actually in many ways benefited China, which was able to make things, send them through Mexico, get the benefit of the agreement as they came into the United States. I thought it was high time that we renegotiated that agreement. We have done that. I think it is going to bring jobs back from Mexico. It's going to open up opportunities for agriculture exports to Canada. So all the way across the board, I think it's going to be good for manufacturing. And I think manufacturing is, there are obviously a lot of parts of our economy, but that and agriculture are the most important parts of our economy, because you are making something and bringing in money from abroad. So I'm very supportive for the USMCA. I think it's unfortunate it took 25 years to undo NAFTA, but it will be a big asset to our manufacturers. And Wisconsin is the second highest percent manufactured jobs in the country behind Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. Jessica King, you can go ahead, please.
Sure, and I think Glenn meant to say that this district is the second largest in manufacturing jobs outside of Indiana, not necessarily the whole state, but obviously it is important. And but the challenge with the USMCA is there are provisions there that are only as good as they can be enforced. And I think, again, the federal government needs to look at how we're going to enforce these terms of this agreement to make sure that businesses in Mexico or businesses operating in Mexico are actually following the terms and provisions. One of the provisions that I believe right now is being violated, and I think the U.S. government needs to take a stronger stronger stance to hold these businesses accountable is that businesses in Mexico are supposed to be offering $15 an hour in certain sectors of manufacturing, and I believe they're not doing it. So I think it's really important, if we're going to get the benefit of this agreement and the benefit of this bargain, that we are going forward with the disputes where these companies are not following the law that was written in the treaty that was agreed to. And I look forward to being an advocate for that, to making sure that we're holding businesses that operate in Mexico to these higher standards and that they are in fact following through, because otherwise it makes it unfair competition and that will hurt our district. So we need to make sure that these provisions are enforced, and I plan to be an advocate for that in Washington.
Thank you. And if you are just tuning in, well, we're about ready to wrap things up, but glad you could be a part of the tail end of today's debate, our second of three in this election cycle 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc. Wrapping up our time today with the two candidates that are vying for your vote to represent you for the next 2 years in Wisconsin's 6th Congressional District. Republican incumbent Representative Glenn Grothman and challenger Jessica King of Oshkosh. You're listening to the Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning into 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our second of three Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc. I am moderator Brian Norton, and we are wrapping up our time today with the two candidates again that are speaking on the issues and are vying for your vote November 3rd to represent you in Washington, D.C. and Wisconsin's 6th Congressional District, which of course encompasses Manitowoc County. Republican Representative and incumbent Glenn Grothman and challenger Jessica King of Oshkosh. Question from our WOMT Shoreline text line. We start with Jessica King this time. It says, during the campaign, you meet families and individuals from all throughout the district. From what you have heard, what is the biggest challenge facing constituents in the 6th Congressional District, and what would you do to combat that specific issue? Would you please explain? And Jessica King, will begin with you.
Surely. I think the number one thing I've heard about is people trying to make ends meet in this recession and during the COVID crisis, and trying to afford child care and trying to meet the needs of their employers so that they can still work and hold their job. And I really believe that at the crux of all of this is truly healthcare reform. We need affordable healthcare. We need a healthcare system that both employers and families can afford. And part of that will only come with, I believe, access to affordable medications. You know, again, the United States is the third largest country in terms of population, and nothing screams to me volume discount more than having that large population, and yet we pay the highest costs for prescriptions in the world. I mean, it's kind of, it's amazing how many people go to Canada, our northern border, and to try to get more affordable medications. And I think that's truly a shame. And I think the number one thing that I could offer, because remember, the House of Representatives is going to remain in Democrat control. So it helps us having a representative that's in that majority party to look out to find ways to pass policy to make sure that basic prescriptions are affordable, in that the 250 most basic prescriptions. So that way all of us can live healthy lives, we can afford our prescriptions, and that'll put a little bit more money back in our pockets so that way we can make ends meet. And that would truly help families, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you, Representative Grothman.
Well, I think the biggest problem we have that I hear from is from small business owners right now. Bills that we've already passed because of the COVID has prevented a lot of businesses from going in recession. Some businesses are actually ahead of the game, but particularly small businesses in the retail sector are laying off people. It's so difficult for some of these businesses if they were not eligible for PPP to keep going. You got to remember, when an individual gets laid off, that's horrible. When a business isn't making money, not only are they not taking in money, but they're having to pay the utilities, pay the taxes, and whatnot. I would like to have another bill passed by Congress directed at these businesses, which will not only help them, but their employees as well. But right now, when I get around the district, I think that's the biggest complaint. With regard to drug cost, Jessica mentioned a bill before, H.R. 3, which I think was an extreme bill. But I do think, and we tried to amend it to make sure we weren't stopping any innovation. That amendment was blocked. But I don't take money from drug companies. I'm supportive of President Trump trying to get us to import drugs from Canada. And I myself am an advocate for biosimilars, trying to do what I can to help people with diabetes get cheaper alternatives.
Thank you, Mr. Grothman. And wow, it went fast, and we have now gotten to the point of the debate where it is time for the candidates to give their closing statements. And in the beginning, we flipped a coin, and Jessica King chose to go last in her open. She'll go last with the close. So, Mr. Grothman, you can go first.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank you for sponsoring these debates again. Very enjoyable. I'd like to ask for another 2 years in Congress. I'd like to continue down the path I've had in the past. I want to be able to continue to help businesses that are hurt by the pandemic. I want to continue to help individuals and businesses by advocating for a more skills-based education. I think that's why I got an honorary degree from Lakeshore Technical College, because I am an advocate of this sort of thing. We have too many people who are far too in debt coming out of our schools, and our businesses, be it manufacturing or healthcare, need more skilled workers getting those high-paid jobs. Other things I want to spend another 2 years on. I am trying to defend what used to be known as sheltered workshops, such as Ascend here in town. There are people in Washington trying to shut down Ascend or similar type of workshops because they feel it's unfair for people with different abilities to work with other people with disabilities. I am working on biosimilars to help people who I think are paying too much for drugs related to diabetes at this time. So I ask for 2 more years. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica King, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This November 3rd, I think it's important to remember the context that we're living in this election cycle. We are in the middle of a recession. We are in the middle of a global pandemic, and it's so important to put representatives in the seats of decision making to make sure that those things change and that we recover, and that we do so in a sustainable way that allows our economic vitality to grow. I've been a Chapter 7 bankruptcy trustee. I've been in local government during the last recession of 2008. I understand the need to support local and state levels of government with economic stimulus. I have not heard Representative Grothman commit to that. And if you want your local and state governments to get that economic stimulus, you need to make sure you're supporting somebody who's willing to commit to it, and I have committed to it today. I think the other thing we need to talk about is affordable health care. Representative Grothman has been in office for 27 years in various capacities, and he has never supported a health care reform policy that truly had a role for government to play, because quite frankly, I don't think he thinks government has a role to play there. And so if you want to have access to health care and access to affordable health care, if businesses want to have a system that they can buy into so that way they can increase wages because they don't have the burden of the benefit structures, we need to send somebody to Washington that can work in a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, and I'm your person. Thank you.
Well, thank both of you, Mr. Grothman and Jessica King, for being a part of today's debate. Very informative. Thank you, and best of luck on November 3rd on Election Day. And thank you again for participating in today's Seehafer News Radio Debates.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for listening to the 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. Learn more about the candidates and the issue that matters most to you by visiting Seehafernews.com.
Proud to be the Wisconsin Broadcasters Station of the Year. WOMT Manitowoc and W300EE Manitowoc, a Seehafer Broadcasting station.